Hello, welcome everybody to this mini book section. My name is Rafael Benavides. Today I will talk to you about the DeltaSpike, the Apache DeltaSpike project. Well, before telling you about DeltaSpike, we need to understand where it came from. The DeltaSpike was uh, created when a lot of companies and different initiatives to create features for CDI decided to join their efforts to create a single source of CDI features. So in 2011, they joined their efforts and created the proposal of this project, which is called DeltaSpike. And then 3 months later we had the first 0.1 release. And then 1 year later, this project was finally placed out of Apache Incubator. So it reached a top level status. And finally, in June of 2014, we had the version 1.0 released. And since then, it's a very active project. We have basically releases each 3 months. And for example, we are now voting for the release 1.5.1. And as you can see, it's a pretty active project. So how DeltaSpike relates to CDI? Well, CDI is just a specification for context and dependency injection, but it does not provide any business-related features. But CDI has an important feature called portable extensions, where it allows you to extend CDI and bring those features and create new features for CDI. And DeltaSpike is an excellent example on how the portable extension could be used to create those extensions. So DeltaSpike is a collection of portable extensions that brings a lot of features for CDI. And it's also important to say that DeltaSpike is very well tested with different CDI versions. So even with the CDI 2.0 that's being developed, DeltaSpike is being tested with the latest version. And not only with the CDI implementations, but also with different application servers from different vendors. So DeltaSpike is very well tested. And also it's important to say that given the innovative way of DeltaSpike, it won the Duke Choice Award of latest year in 2014. You can get more information about DeltaSpike at the apache.org, DeltaSpikeApache.org website. So, as I said, DeltaSpike provides a lot of features, and features for different purposes. And to be able to get those features in a better organized way, DeltaSpike is divided in sub-modules where you can see features that are related for persistence in JPA and data module. You can see features for schedule, for security, and of course for core, which brings more general features. And now I'll show you a little bit more of the features of DeltaSpike. One nice feature about DeltaSpike is the exception handler. So suppose that you need to treat the exception in a asynchronous way, where you can integrate the exception, place the exception inside this CDI event system. So you can have a lot of handlers to treat the exception in a specific way. So suppose that exception happens on your application, and you need to treat that exception, for example, printing a message on the console. You can also take that exception, place on a JMS queue or topic to be consumed, or you can get that exception, for example, to be placed on a dashboard where someone from the infrastructure team can see what's happening to your application. Basically, what you need to do is to get that exception, place it inside the event, treat that like an event of CDI. And then you can have a lot of exception handlers, each one for a specific purpose, treating that exception asynchronously. And suppose that you want to bind another exception handler. It's easy as adding another exception handler to your class path, and then you can treat that exception in a different way. And since you can plug a lot of exception handlers, you can decide if the exception was handled and continue propagating the execution, the treatment of that exception for other handlers. Well, DeltaSpike also brings another feature for the treatment of project stage. So when you are developing your application has different moments, different stages during the life cycle. So the application starts at the development, and then it reaches the unit testing, integration testing. Finally, it reaches to the staging, and when it's done to be published, it reaches the production. Of course, that each one of these stages of the application, you may need different behaviors for your application. Sometimes you need that CDI bean become available just for that moment, for that stage. For example, in development stage, you may need to have a mock bean. Sometimes you need to print a banner on your HTML page saying, okay, this application is in development mode. Or you can have also different configurations for your applications. Let's say the username for the connection with the database is one for the development, and it's another for the production. All those are real examples of different behaviors for your application. And DeltaSpike makes it easy to control and to identify what the current project stage for your application. Because CDI brings this class called project stage, which allows you to inject that. And once that this project stage is injected in your classes, you can make things like that. You can ask if the project stage is development, comparing it with the project stage class. And as I said, sometimes you can also have snippets of HTML pages being presented with a big red banner. Okay, this application is on development. You can simply say here that the application is on development, and that snippet will show or not. DeltaSpike comes with predefined project stages. It comes with unit, development, system tests, integration tests, staging, and production. But of course, if your company uses exotic project stage, you can also create your own project stage with creating a custom project stage. Okay? But the question is, how do I define the current project stage to Delta Spike? In this example here, I'm showing you that I'm using the key value org Apache Delta Spike project stage equal development. I'm using that with -d, which I can place in the Java machine. But the fact is that Delta Spike can get this key value pair from different config sources, because it uses the Delta Spike configuration mechanism that I will show you at this moment. The Delta Spike configuration mechanism provides ways to get key values that you can use for configuration purpose from system properties, environment variables, JNDI values, and as default, you can place these key values inside the metainf Apache Delta Spike properties file. So, of course, if you define a value inside the default configuration file for Delta Spike, this value can be overwritten, supposed by placing environment variable or using system properties like I did here on this example. Another uses for Delta Spike configuration mechanism is shown here, where I said to you earlier, suppose that I need to get the information about the current username. I can do it that programmatically. I can use the config resolver class and get the proper value username, and that will look for the configuration file. It will look for the system property with that key to try to resolve the value. But suppose on that case that I need to get the database username, and I have a different username for the production and for the development. If my code is like that, get project stage aware property value, it will see if my project stage is on production, and it will resolve to one value. And if the project stage, the current project stage is development, it will resolve to another value. And since CDI is very type safe, I can also do things like that. I need to get the port of the database, but I want to get that as an integer. So I can resolve that value and return that like an integer. And I also can get the default value if it does not find the value on all those configuration mechanisms. And I also can make things like that. Sometimes, suppose that I have, like on this fourth example, I have an exotic date format, and I want to get that value as a date. I can create my own custom date converter and to parse that value from string and convert to date. So as you can see, it's very type safe. But well, we are talking about CDI, and things can get more interesting if I can inject the value with an annotation. And this is possible with the config properties annotation, where I can simply say the key, and it will get the key from one of those config sources and inject that inside my Java class. And as you can see here, it also makes the type conversion for you. So if the value is an integer, like the database port, I can simply use that and inject that value from the configuration. Well, Delta Spike also brings a feature for internationalization. Look this code here. You have an interface called myFaces with some methods names that return and method signatures which returns a string. Each method name will match with a value inside the resource bundle file. So suppose that I have a method here called welcome to, which receives a parameter. Then I can have in my resource bundle file the welcome to and a parameter inside the files. Of course, one file for each locale. And of course, I don't want to get to be stuck with the method name. I can override the method name and paste in here the proper key for the resource bundle file. Let's see how I can use this. Suppose that I want to have an internationalization in my Java class. I can simply inject that class that I created previously, and I can do things like that. I can create a new face message and call message welcome to passing a parameter. Of course, based on the current locale, it will resolve the resource bundle file and return the proper string with the right translation for you. And this is possible because, and you can see here, it's an interface. How that's possible that a simple interface without any implementation does all those trick stuff for you. This is possible because DeltaSpike uses the partial beam model that creates a dynamic implementation for you for that interface. You can also use that to log an information. If you say here message, which will call this method, which will resolve to a custom message, and it will log DeltaSpike is awesome. And since this interface is also using the named, you can use that inside JSP or JSF or every other HTML mechanism that uses and resolve expression values. DeltaSpike also brings you the exclude annotation. This is kind of like a Vettel annotation from CDI 1.1, but better. And why is it better? Because you can control for example, if that beam is excluded on a specific project stage, or sometimes, as I said, you want to have a mock class, you can say, okay, exclude that mock class in all project stage except when I'm in development. So this makes things really easy for you to define when the project stage, when that class become available or not. DeltaSpike also allows you to inject resources. You can do, for example, use the annotation injectable resources, pass a myProperties file here, and you can read that file as an input string in your class. The default behavior of DeltaSpike is to get a file from your class path. But of course, you can implement the injectable resource provider class and create your own resource provider that goes, for example, in a REST endpoint to get a file, or to go to a specific HTTP server and get that file. You can, as you can see, DeltaSpike is very well extendable. And now I will show you one of the modules that I like the most because it brings you a great productivity, which is the data model. The data model is an implementation of repository pattern, which is defined by Eric Evan in his domain-driven design book as a representation of all objects of a certain type as a conceptual set. What does that mean? Most of us are used to create generic DAOs, especially when generic became so popular. It's common to see things like that. You have a generic DAO saying that that's a DAO for the entity user, and where you define the type of primary key. With DeltaSpike, you can use the repository annotation, create an interface, and extend this interface. And DeltaSpike, using again the partial bean model, it will create automatically for you the implementation of all the common methods. So you don't need to worry to specify methods like save, remove, refresh, count, find all, find by primary key, because this is automatically created by DeltaSpike for you. And what the developer needs to worry about is just how he can create queries. And this is how, this is another great thing about DeltaSpike, because you can do things like that. Suppose in this case where you have the user entity, and I want to create a new query for the username, to get a username based on his username and password. If I write a method name like that, find by username and password, DeltaSpike will automatically create a query for you like this. Select from user, where username and password match with the parameter that you set. You don't need to create the query yourself. The name of the method will define the query. This makes the code more standard, more verbose, and also make you all the team to be working in a standard way. But of course, you can specify the query yourself using the query annotation. You can see here that when I use the query annotation, I returned a list of roles on this find by roles example. But suppose that you want to have more control on the result. Instead of returning a list, you can return the DeltaSpike class query results. And you can use that to do pagination, for example. Once that you have the query result object, you can have two ways of doing pagination. You have the query API style, where you can do paged max results 10, first result 50, get the result list. Or you can use a pagination style and have the same result with page size of 10 to page 5, and both works the same way. It's just different approach to get the same style. And then you also can get the number of pages that you have returned on that query. So as you can see, these models, yeah, it uses JPA. So another model that's important to mention is the security, where it allows you to create an interceptor style authorization. So since it's very well type safe, suppose that you create an annotation called admin only, and you want to place that admin only annotation on bean, and only users who has the role admin will be allowed to execute this method. You just need to add the security binding type to the annotation and create a class with the logic that will allow or forbid the execution of the method. Here you place the annotation again, say that it secures the annotation, and here you place the logic. And the return is a boolean. If you return true, the method will be allowed to execute, and if you return false, of course, it will throw an access denied exception. And for people that are still using JSF, there is a model that provides a feature with uh, that allow you to create a face message very easy, and that's integrated with the internationalization model from the core. So suppose that, as we saw on the core model, I have here a message bundle that there is a method called welcome to DeltaSpike, which will return welcome to that DeltaSpike string. To create a faces message, I can inject this JSF message object from DeltaSpike and just call this method message.addInfo. Well, so I'm defining here the severity of the face message and call the welcome DeltaSpike method. This will create a faces message with the welcome to DeltaSpike string for you. It's very easy and very type safe as well. Well, most of the times we need to have just a scope for different tabs or different windows in our application. And DeltaSpike brings you the window scope, where this is the more close to our day-by-day needs, where we just need different scope for different tabs, and this is very simple to use because this model brings the window scoped annotation. And another feature for DeltaSpike JSF model is a way to prevent the double submission of the click button. Because it's common that sometimes when the user clicks and when the application is taking too much time to return a response, the user goes there and click it twice. So with this annotation, prevent double submit, DeltaSpike automatically will include a feature on your application to prevent the double submit. And finally, for the schedule model, we see here that it's integrated with Quartz. And since Quartz job is managed natively by Quartz, it's not possible to have the injection of service inside the job. But that's easy with DeltaSpike, because with DeltaSpike, you can have these Quartz jobs managed by DeltaSpike, which allows you to define, using the schedule annotation, a cron expression, and also if that jobs will be automatically scheduled on when the application starts or not. In this example here, I'm saying that I don't want to start that job, and I injected a service here that when the job will be executed, this service can call this job can call a different service. So with DeltaSpike, I can use the scheduler class to decide the proper moment to register that job. So that was an overview of DeltaSpike. I hope that you enjoyed. You can get the DeltaSpike, more information about DeltaSpike at the website. Any questions? Sorry?
The data module, does it support like MongoDB or any NoSQL data type?
Okay. Sorry? Yeah. Well, the question is about the data model. If it supports all kind of database or not. Well, the data model is basically a JPA feature, so it supports all database that has a JDBC driver. So if the database has a JDBC driver for that, of course you can create entity manager for that, and data model you use the entity manager to provide those features. Well, it's not an implementation. It uses the provider that you use in your application. Yeah, depending exactly. The question was if the data model is Ants Manager implementation. No, it's basically a feature on top that uses the existing Ants Manager's feature. So depending of your application server, you can have the data model using Hibernate or Eclipse linking, depending of the application server. Okay, thanks a lot.